Hi, welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt. And this is the Maserati Grecale. This is the brand new Maserati Grecale in Modena trim. This is their X3, Q5 Stelvio and GLC contender. And based on what I've seen so far, I'm very intrigued. So let's see if this new Italian can take on all of Germany. The Maserati Grecale. A compact SUV has been a pretty obvious hole in Maserati's lineup for a while, and a very competitive and lucrative one, if I might add. So the Grecale needs to bring it if it wants to compete in this arena. The good news is, it seems like it's brought the fight with it. We're in the Modena trim, which is the middle of the range, and as such, it gets a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder with a 48-volt mild hybrid system. Total output on that is good for 325 horsepower and 332 pound-feet of torque. And that's not bad, considering a 4-cylinder in an X3 makes like 75 horsepower less than this. But if you still weren't sold, there's a Trofeo version coming, which will drop in the powertrain from Maserati's Halo MC20. That means twin-turbo V6 and over 500 horsepower. And even without that, this 2-liter, this thing can boogie. The power gets sent through a snappy ZF 8-speed transmission to all 4 wheels, which means 0 to 60 is done in under 5 seconds. And that's pretty impressive. My favorite thing about it isn't even the speed or the power, it's the snaps and the crackles that you get on shift. A dramatic shift at load is one of my favorite things and a quick way for a car to get on my nice list. The quick and torquey motor, that's just a nice bonus. Speed and power is great, but as a Maserati there are some handling and dynamic expectations to meet as well. And this Grecale delivers there too. You have a sharp front end that feels like it wants to bite and dive into a corner. You have the optional adaptive suspension here that will firm up and adapt to the road. And you have an all-wheel drive system that's rear biased and brings an actual limited slip differential out back. And this thing only weighs about 4,500 pounds with the hybrid component added to it. And all that means that this Grecale likes to dance and it likes to rotate. And that's what I'm looking for out of a fun SUV. And of course, the cracks on shift. But let's slow things down for a second, because this isn't the Trofeo, and people might want to drive their Italian premium SUV like upstanding citizens once in a while. Well, dialed back into comfort mode, all the sharp edges are sanded away, and the car just becomes a nice place to sit while you get from A to B. The steering lightens up, the transmission smooths out and slows down shifts, the suspension relaxes, and it feels like the cabin somehow gets quieter. All that's to say, it's got a nice ride. But with that, let's step outside and talk about some finer details. Okay, I'll be honest, when I first saw this thing in person, I thought, oh, it's a little bit bigger than I thought it was going to be. But it doesn't seem to have affected the ride or the handling in any negative way. And then you step outside and it looks like this. Just like the Levante, I love the way it looks. It looks exactly as a Maserati should, but with a modern interpretation. You've got more aggressive and robust split LED running lights. You've got really aggressive hood sculpting, and you have the iconic concave grille with a dual trident. And the lower fascia gets some nice black accents, cooling, and a splitter. This Bianco Astro paint looks epic, and I hope it comes through on camera. Then around the side you have the classic Maserati way with the trim and the 3 gills on the front fender. And just underneath that are huge 21-inch wheels, which look incredible. They're very modern, very cool. And of course, you've got red brakes peeking out from behind. Your door handles are electronic releases to reduce drag. The profile shape itself is very Levante, with a tapered rear slope to the roofline that maximizes rear seat headroom while giving it a fast look. And of course, it wouldn't be a Maserati without a trident on the D-pillar. The rear is also very Levante, with similar taillights, and they're connected with that chrome bar. And then the black diffuser and quad tips. This may be a 4-cylinder, but it definitely rips. So it goes well and it looks great, but this is debuting the new Maserati design language. So let's check out the interior. Okay, I have to say, we just got out of the big sister Levante, and the interior here on this Grecale is worlds better. I mean, this is it, Chief. In terms of the design, you have this nice rich red leather. You get Maserati logos stitched into the headrest in contrasted white stitching. And the stitching throughout the rest of the seat and the rest of the dash is nice and clean. The dash design itself is clean and modern, and that center Porsche clock is back, but it's digital this time, and you can change the face of it. You've got a huge head-up display with augmented reality. You have a fully digital gauge cluster here that you didn't have in the Levante. And then you have a really handsome steering wheel. The start-stop button is on the steering wheel, which I love, and the drive mode selector is the other dial on the other side. It's very Ferrari indeed. And then in classic Maserati fashion, you have mile-long paddle shifters that are column-mounted behind the steering wheel. And I just love that. But now let's talk about something we don't usually, the door card. It's beautiful and wrapped in leather, but it also has one of the coolest speaker covers on it. And if you were looking for the handle, it's a button. And the safety lever below it isn't hidden at all, so in case the battery dies, you can still get out. And then back on the dash, you've got a big infotainment screen. It's running the same software as Uconnect 5, but that's a good thing. The graphics are sharp and crisp. I love the 360 cameras, and you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and a bunch of other modern stuff. There is one thing I don't love, and it's not part of the screen, but it looks like it almost is. And it's the gear selector, which seems to be hidden beneath the infotainment screen, but above the climate screen. And then speaking of that, below that gear selector is the secondary climate screen, which is dedicated to climate and comfort functions, which reminds me heavily of the Audis and the Range Rovers that we've been in. It's not bad company to keep. And then you look up and you've got a huge panoramic roof that bathes this red interior in light. And then there's the rear seats, which are a lot bigger than I expected and way more roomy than the cousin Stelvios. In the rear you get great stuff like climate controls, vents, heated rear seats, and a bunch of charge ports. And finally, the trunk is a great and usable size that rivals things like the X3 and maybe even the GLC. I have to say I'm really impressed with the new interior, but at 92 grand as tested, I guess I kinda should be. But I will say this, I've tested more expensive, worse Mercedes interiors. And that feels like a good time to get into the final thoughts. So the Maserati Grecale Modena. At and above the $90,000 mark, it's really expensive when we start talking about comparing it to the German rivals we've been discussing throughout the video. But as ever, with Maserati, your money isn't going to a nice appliance to get you from A to B. There's a little more soul and emotion here. So thanks to Maserati of Milwaukee for letting me have a go. And hopefully I'll see you again behind the wheel of the Trofeo.